It all began with Bruce Lee, and we decided to start working out together in Los Angeles, which we did for over 2 years.
Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee are two of the most iconic martial artists the world has ever seen.
Or don't hit back.
With incredible fighting skills, successful careers, and a legacy that will never be erased. How did the journey of these two intertwine, and what shocking revelations has Norris revealed about Lee's death?
And Bruce Lee was there as a special guest, and he was doing a series called The Green Hornet.
Find out as we uncover the truth about Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee. The final boss. The legendary fight between Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris in Way of the Dragon is probably the most iconic martial arts duel in cinema history, and it was a collaboration very few people saw coming. As two of the most successful fighters in their fields, Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris had built up a strong legacy, and to see their worlds collide was something the world would not forget in a hurry. But that was the on-screen reality. Off-screen, Lee and Norris were close pals who enjoyed training together and learning new skills to up their game. Both men were born in 1940, and although the circumstances of their childhood were grossly different, they were united in their shared dreams to become the most unforgettable face to ever appear on screen. On one hand, there was Lee, born on November 27 in San Francisco to Lee Hoi-chuen, Chinese opera singer and film actor, and Grace Ho Lee was only a child when the family moved from their home base of San Francisco to Hong Kong, where the young boy was introduced to the growing film industry as a child actor. Believe it or not, Lee got his first role as the baby who was carried on stage in the film Golden Girl, and from there on, he kept snatching more and more roles. Earlier in his life, he became a student of the martial arts legend, IP Man, who helped him build a solid foundation, both as a performer and as a fighter. As he grew older, Lee started participating in several competitions, and his incredible speed and agility caught the attention of the big names in the martial arts world. By the 1970s, Lee's action flicks had almost single-handedly elevated the Hong Kong movie industry to a height no one could dream of, and he became a force to be reckoned with. Norris, on the other hand, was born on March 10, 1940 in Ryan, Oklahoma, to Wilma and Ray D. Norris. Chuck's father was a World War II veteran, bus driver, and truck driver. Unlike Lee, who stepped into the world of lights, cameras, and action as a baby, Norris had quite an unremarkable childhood. The future action star was described as a non-athletic, shy kid who didn't really do well in class. Added to that, his father's alcoholism and the family's financial troubles further damaged his childhood experience, leading him to develop a debilitating introversion that lasted for his entire childhood. Norris's entry into the world of martial arts came in 1958, when he joined the United States Air Force as an air policeman and was deployed to Osan Air Base in South Korea. It was there that he earned the nickname Chuck and began training in the martial arts technique Tang Soo Do. These skills would eventually prove invaluable after he left the Army, as he began participating in martial arts competitions. It was at one of these competitions that Chuck met Lee in 1967, and the two formed a bond that has remained unsevered for decades. The worlds collide.
So he called me up and said, I want to do a movie with a fight scene that everyone will remember called Return of the Dragon. He said, would you come over and do the fight scene with me?
The first time Chuck and Lee met was in 1967 at the All-American Karate Open Championships at Madison Square Garden, where Lee demonstrated his incredible skills and talent, and Chuck clinched the championship. After the event, the two men spent hours talking about their respective fighting philosophies, which eventually led to an epic sparring session that lasted until 4 a.m. This single meeting became the foundation of a deep friendship that endured for many years, and even though the two stars were worlds apart, they were united in a common dream to bring martial arts to mainstream audiences. For the next 2 years, Chuck and Lee met up in Lee's Los Angeles home, training in his backyard and while sharing knowledge about martial arts techniques. According to stories from confirmed sources, it was actually Norris who convinced Lee about the usefulness of kicks in combat situations. In a revelation shared by the action star following Lee's death,
and we decided to start working out together in Los Angeles, which we did for over 2 years.
Norris explained how Lee's fighting philosophies were starkly different from his, and how the Chinese star believed only in kicking below the waist and no further. Norris, who was and still is a master of swooping high kicks and roundhouses, demonstrated the effectiveness of these high kicks to a very impressed Lee. However, it's worth noting that prior to this encounter, Lee had showcased some pretty crazy high kicks on screen, so it wasn't as though Chuck taught him everything he knew about the technique. What Chuck simply did was show Lee how effective those strikes can be in a combat situation, and soon the Chinese star began incorporating them in his fights both on-screen and off-screen. Apparently, Lee enjoyed sparring with Norris so much that when it was time to choose the final boss for his iconic 1972 action flick Way of the Dragon, the first person that came to mind was Chuck, Way of the Dragon. When Bruce Lee started working on his new movie in 1972, no one could have predicted that it would become such a cultural phenomenon. Upon its release, the film Way of the Dragon instantly became a smash hit, racking in a staggering $130 million at the box office, which is around $700 million today. All of this from a movie that cost only about $130 million to produce. So, what exactly made this movie so special? Well, besides the captivating plot, which involves the owners of a restaurant in Rome and a crime boss, most people remember the film for the iconic final boss fight scene at the end. But did you know that that fight was illegal to begin with? To understand this story well, we travel back in time to 1972, when Lee was preparing for this mega project. At this point in his career, the martial arts star had already starred in 2 movies under the Golden Harvest Network. Following the success of the 2 previous films, The Big Boss and Fist of Fury, he signed another deal, which gave him total creative control as both writer and director. This allowed him to introduce twists and turns into the whole plot, as well as the freedom to bring in anyone he desired. The original plan was to shoot the entire movie in the United States, but that plan soon fell through due to some undisclosed issues, leaving Lee to seek a better alternative. The next option on the table was Rome, and Lee chose this place because he wanted to see what a kung fu fight in the Colosseum would look like. The inspiration came from watching the 1960 historical epic, Spartacus. The only problem with his plan was that filming in the Colosseum was illegal, which is why scenes are rarely shot in the amphitheater even if it fits the storyline. Even Hollywood hits like Spartacus and Gladiator had to recreate the whole set from scratch. But Lee wasn't about to let such a little hurdle get in the way of his vision. To gain access to the ancient facility, Lee did a little back alley deal with some of the Roman officials. This allowed them to sneak in their cameras while pretending they were tourists. However, they could only stay within the Colosseum for a few hours before their cover would be blown. So Lee and his team worked super fast, but even working at lightning speed didn't give them enough time to capture all the scenes, and Norris and Lee had to complete the sequence back at the set. The editors then clipped the footage together to form one of the most epic fights ever captured on camera. The movie launched both Norris and Lee into the next stage of their lives, and although Lee wasn't around to make many more movies after that, Way of the Dragon cemented his legacy as a crazy fighter no one could defeat. Chuck Norris revealed the shocking truth about Bruce Lee's death. On July 20, 1973, the whole world was united in mourning as news of Bruce Lee's death spread like wildfire. Since then, the circumstances surrounding his untimely demise have raised questions, many of which remain unanswered. Fast forward to 2018, and Chuck Norris would finally address the rumors during an interview with MMA Imports. As a close friend and longtime training buddy of Lee, Chuck had some inside knowledge about his private life. Although many of the things he revealed were already public knowledge at this point, his corroboration gave the truth more validity. To start with, Chuck talked about a Taiwanese actress called Betty Ting Pei, who had quite a close relationship with Lee back in the day. On that fateful day, Lee was in Hong Kong to have dinner with George Lazenby, the second actor to play the iconic British spy James Bond. The whole meeting was set up to discuss the possibility of Lazenby appearing in a Bruce Lee film, and so around 2 p.m., Lee met up with his friend and producer Raymond Chow at his home to discuss the making of Game of Death. The two worked together until around 4 p.m., when they both headed to the home of Ting Pei. On arrival, the trio went over the script, and Lee even enacted some of the scenes while they got high. Soon, Chow left Lee and Ting Pei alone to attend a dinner meeting, and that was when things got a little confusing. The details of exactly what happened afterwards are unclear, but according to the official version, Lee suddenly developed a headache and was given the painkiller Equagesic by the Taiwanese actress. After taking the drug, Lee took a nap, but unfortunately, he never woke up. As time passed on that day, Ting Pei began to panic, and after trying unsuccessfully to wake Lee up, she picked up the phone and called Chow, who sprinted back to the apartment with lightning speed. He also tried waking Lee up, but that failed as well. Then, as a last resort, a doctor was called, and he spent over 10 minutes trying to revive the star. When this also failed, they quickly rushed him to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, where he was declared dead on arrival. He was 32. News of Lee's death hit everyone like an earthquake, and most people kept wondering how such a vibrant young man would suddenly sleep and never wake up. So they turned to Dr. Thierry, a reputable forensic scientist who had overseen over 1,000 autopsies to examine the body. According to his autopsy report, Lee's death was caused by a condition called cerebral edema. Apparently, his brain had swollen by 13%, causing his instant death. It was also determined that the condition was caused by the Equagesic he took on that day, which contained both aspirin and the tranquilizer meprobamate. The only problem with this wasn't the first time Lee would be using the medication, so what could have gone wrong this time around? The answer lies in an incident that occurred months before the actor's death: the search for the truth. Although Chuck's revelation about Bruce Lee's death fits perfectly with the official narrative, there is more to the story than meets the eye. Back in 1973, when the actors first died, investigators launched a massive probe of his last days alive, as they sought to understand what could have led to such a shocking death. But while everyone focused on the events of July 20, what they failed to consider was the earlier evidence that something was really wrong with the star. You see, several months before his death, Lee underwent an operation to remove the sweat glands in his armpit, because he thought dank pits looked bad on camera. While this definitely increased his aesthetic appeal, it also meant that his body could no longer dissipate heat properly, exposing him to some dangerous scenarios. He wouldn't feel the effect of this until it was too late. On May 10, Lee walked into a tiny dubbing room to re-record his dialogue for Enter the Dragon. While he was recording, the director observed that the air conditioner was producing some noise which could ruin the whole sound, so he turned it off. That turned out to be a huge mistake, because just 30 minutes later, the room had become as hot as a sauna, causing Lee to collapse and start convulsing. Shocked and dazed at the sight, the men rushed him to the hospital, where doctors quickly came to his rescue, saving him from certain death. Coincidentally, the diagnosis was cerebral edema, the same condition that eventually took his life. Could he have survived the second incident if he was discovered on time? Maybe, maybe not. We'll probably never know. Even though the doctors were able to revive him and treat the brain swelling successfully, no one really paid attention to the fact this was most likely caused by heat stroke. According to statistics, an average of 3 high school and college football players lose their lives to heat stroke every year. And the most common finding in their autopsies is that they all suffered from cerebral edema. So, could it be possible that Lee's removal of his sweat gland, coupled with the initial incident in the recording studio, eventually led to his untimely death? Quite plausible, but not everybody agrees. As a matter of fact, a recent study revealed that his death may have been caused by something entirely different. Be like water. The philosophy that governed Lee's life could be summed up in those 3 words, but according to a study published in 2022, Lee may have taken that statement quite literally. This group of kidney specialists from Spain theorized that excessive intake of water may have played a vital role in his death. But how? Going by the findings made by these scientists, the brain swelling was not actually caused by the painkillers, but a condition known as hyponatremia. This is when blood experiences low sodium concentration, which is often caused by excessive water or fluid in the body. Of course, this was a very shocking revelation, as it challenged the previous speculations that had been made about the actor's death. But the scientists put up a solid defense for their claims. They believe Lee had multiple risk factors that could have led to hyponatremia, like his high liquid intake, which could have been caused by his marijuana usage. There were also other factors that altered his kidneys' ability to excrete water, including his use of prescription drugs, alcohol, and low solute intake. Admittedly, Lee's wife Linda once mentioned his fluid-based diet of carrot and apple juice, which could have also played a role. In conclusion, the scientists believe that these interconnected factors probably became stacked up so much that Lee's body couldn't handle it anymore, and without warning, his system shut down. While this theory may seem to dispel all the rumors surrounding Lee's death, not everyone agrees with the findings. Even after many years have passed, some still hold on to theories that a little bit of foul play was involved in Lee's death, and that there was more to it than the media was letting on. The Ting Pei conspiracy. The first person who got wrapped up in controversy was Betty Ting Pei, which isn't shocking since Bruce Lee died on her bed. Although it has since been established that the action star's death was accidental, fans seem to disagree, and a large portion of them believe Ting Pei must have had something to do with it. It didn't really take long for the rumors to spread, and just 3 days after Lee's death, the China Star published a story titled, "Betty Ting Pei's Fragrant Chamber Killed the Dragon." The stories began to spread like wildfire, and the further it went, the more embellished it became. People created their own versions of events, with claims that he was poisoned by Ting Pei, or that he lost his life during intercourse. Some even claimed he wasn't really dead and was just hiding somewhere ready to spring up a surprise anytime soon. But that's not where it ends. The rumors also stirred up anger and resentment against Ting Pei, and it didn't take long for her to start receiving disturbing threats on her life. In early August, a bomb threat was called in to the police after a suspicious brown envelope suddenly showed up in a public square. The package bore the inscription, "Betty Ting knows the cause of Bruce Lee's death," but thankfully it turned out to be a fake bomb. Over the next few weeks, though, 3 more fake bombs were discovered across the city with the same kind of theme. While some of these sensational rumors may have caught the public imagination, no concrete proof has been found to suggest that Ting Pei was involved in Lee's death, so take the theories with a pinch of salt. However, the Taiwanese actress wasn't the only one who got implicated in the entire ordeal. Some believe that Lee was killed by a criminal gang. The Triads conspiracy. Did you know that Bruce Lee once ran away from Hong Kong after getting in trouble with the Triads? Believe it or not, the action star had to leave the country at some point, although this was way before he became massively famous. You see, even though Lee was a child star, he was also known as a street fighter who didn't mind starting chaos anytime he was in the mood for some action. Being a student of IP Man, one of the most iconic martial arts mentors of all time, had its perks. It allowed Lee to learn fighting techniques and skills that he didn't essentially use in the best way. Armed with this unrivaled combat ability, Lee led a gang called the Junction Street 8 Tigers, who would back him up anytime he got into trouble. Due to his violent nature, he became involved in a number of violent incidents, but the one that sent him packing happened in 1959. On that fateful day, Lee picked a fight with a Triad gangster's son, beating the boy into a pulp. Like the plot of a high-octane Chinese action flick, young Lee successfully placed a huge target on his back, as the Triads were known for their unforgiving nature and constant thirst for revenge. Luckily for Lee, the boy's parents decided to handle the matter in a legal manner by reporting Lee to the police. The officers then approached Lee's parents, threatening to arrest their son if he didn't stop his gang activities. And now that his parents knew how big of a trouble he was in, they decided it was time he left Hong Kong for the United States, where he would be safe. But could it be possible that the Triads didn't let go of the grudge all those years? That's quite unlikely, however, there's still another angle to this theory. You see, there are rumors that Lee had actually gotten into trouble with the triads again after he became a superstar. Some say he didn't want to pay protection fee, others say he was engaged in some illegal activities. But one thing these theories have in common is that they've never been proven, and no concrete evidence exists to confirm their validity. But if you thought that was the most outlandish theory about Bruce Lee's death, then we've got news for you, because this next one takes things to a whole new level. The touch of death. It has been continually suggested that Bruce Lee was actually murdered by other martial artists using a secret technique known as dim mak. Also known as the touch of death, this ancient art form has only been mastered by a handful of people, and they believe it grants the power to take a life with a single strike. In the 1980 films Fist of Fear, Touch of Death, martial artist Aaron Banks sat down for an obviously scripted interview where he talked about how Lee had been hit with this deadly move days or weeks before his death, and how the culprit couldn't be identified since the effects of the strike wasn't instantaneous. The theory was further corroborated by Jan Hollander in an article featured in the 1985 Black Belt magazine. Hollander claims that Lee had received the dim mak strike several weeks before his death, although that claim has still not been proven. But why would anyone attack Lee with such a fatal blow? Well, some claim that other martial art practitioners got jealous of the actor's success and issued a hit on his life. Others believe they were pissed that he was teaching the ancient Chinese martial arts to the Westerners, so they had to take him out. But since the attacker was never identified, the theory has since been put to rest. But then again, Bruce Lee's death created a web of conspiracy so tangled that it would take a very long time to sort through them all. Perhaps the most depressing of these theories is the one that links Lee's death to the untimely demise of his son, Brandon. Curse of the Dragon. When Brandon Lee died on set in 1993, it was like history repeating itself again. Brandon was Bruce's only son, who followed in his footsteps and pursued a career in acting and martial arts. Thanks to his father's connections, Brandon quickly earned small roles in several fairly successful films, including Legacy of Rage and Showdown in Little Tokyo. But his most successful work was on the 1993 action thriller, The Crow. Unfortunately, this also turned out to be his last movie appearance before his death. On March 31, 1993, Brandon was on the movie set in Wilmington, North Carolina when actor Michael Massey shot him with a prop gun as part of the plot. Sadly, a live round from a previous shot had become lodged in the .44 Magnum revolver. So when the shot was fired, the live rounds traveled straight into Brandon's body, striking him in the abdomen. He was instantly rushed to the hospital, where surgeons tried their very best to save him. Tragically, he never made it and eventually passed away on April 1, 1993. He was just 28. The Crow was supposed to be Brandon's breakout moment, and although the movie went on to record massive success, the star of the show wasn't around to see it. Brandon's death also attracted speculations as people started drawing parallels between his death and his father's death, which gave rise to the Curse of the Dragon theory. This theory postulates that Bruce and his son were plagued by a terrible cause, which ultimately led to their deaths at crucial times of their lives. But what are the odds that the father-son duo lost their lives due to a supernatural attack? Quite slim, to be honest. But in spite of that, many fans still believe that a dark higher power was involved in the whole thing. But in spite of the tragic and mysterious nature of his death, Lee's legacy has remained unrivaled for decades now. He's considered by some commentators and martial artists as the most influential martial artist of all time. He's been lauded as a cultural icon, who bridged the gap between the East and the West, opening the door for other performers like Jackie Chan to access the global market with their content. Books have been written about him, documentaries, films have been produced, and his story has been retold many times. His death earned him a cult-like status. Until today, he still commands a loyal fan base, who both love and revere him. But beyond that, his memories live on in the hearts of his beloved family and devoted friends like Chuck Norris. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.